Heyo, welcome back to Feel Good Friday. This week, Nova Scotia and PEI have higher rates of melanoma. Let's go. Japanese couple speak for the first time in 20 years. And a stroke left a woman unable to speak, and AI is helping her restore her speech 20 years later.
Whoa, dude, you missed that one. You should have ended after that second one. But I applaud your effort.
Well, you know what? I actually struggled with what order that would go. See, here, let me.
Good thing Jared's back next week.
I'll give you my rationale. I was channeling Jared in this decision making process because the stroke and AI piece is very like what the healthy, and we usually do that at the end. So I was like, let's leave that at the end. But we could do the Japanese couple.
You tell me. You be my little AI and guide me through this conversation.
Okay, I'll guide you. I'll guide you. Maybe we'll do the stroke piece second. All right, but to kick it off, some really great fun news.
You did say some crazy shit there
for all of us homegrown peeps here in Nova Scotia and the Atlantic provinces.
So we're getting more skin cancer than other people.
We are.
How?
There is a positive bend to this, oddly enough. Okay, so some new research. I know, right? You wouldn't. I know you're thinking skin cancer, melanoma, higher rates, Nova Scotia PEI. How could that be positive? But also, let me tell you, as we get into it, you'll go, oh, okay.
I do want to say before we get into it, I feel personally, I'm curious what you think about this, because I feel personally, like a lot of people who aren't from here will be like, oh, that weather on the East Coast, like kind of like saying like, oh, your weather fucking sucks. And I take a bit of personal offense to that, because I actually find our weather here is generally pretty good, and it gets a bad rep for. Well,
we know that a negative trumps positive all the time. Like people, like we have a negative. Almost everybody, statistically, everybody has a negative bias. Like we are biased to the things that are bad. They seem to overshadow the things that are good.
Right.
And so we have, no doubt, horrendous, awful weather from about early mid-November until mid-April. Things start to turn.
Man, like even that statement makes me feel like in my bones, like, that's not true.
As somebody who traveled for like a decade in the winter and always left, I shared that same feeling. And then over the past, really since COVID happened,
I also did travel a lot in the winter.
I started spending the whole winter here, and now I get it. It sucks.
But it's not.
And I'm not saying it sucks. I'm not saying that I'm unhappy about it. I'm just saying it sucks.
But it's not as bad as a lot of other places. And so I find that, so like, for example, if you look at Newfoundland has what I would say would be relatively, considering how close it is to here, has worse weather in the winter than we do. Would you
Brian,
agree with
I'm going to just tell you that your speculations here are giving away the story. So what
I was going to say from all of this is my initial reaction was like, oh, that is surprising that we have more melanoma because our weather is shitty. Like that was my initial reaction, but I don't actually feel that way. Like,
right. And you shouldn't, because you'd be wrong.
Is it because our weather isn't that bad?
So there are a lot of different reasons. There are many different possibilities for why melanoma rates could be higher in Nova Scotia and PEI, but basically it's because we have great weather.
No way.
It's essentially because we have great weather. And so this was really interesting. So basically they talked about in this article, they talked about pleasantness. And whenever you get a pleasant temperature, and they actually didn't define what pleasant is. I'm sure it's in a range. I'm sure it's
right.
I'm sure it's from, I don't know, let's say like 20 to 30 degrees is probably pleasant. Like above 30 degrees is pretty stanky. I'm not really a big fan of plus 30.
Well, I would define pleasant as like 15 to like 23 degrees is pleasant.
Yeah. Pleasant.
Like right. that's the thing for me is like I think we have very
I'm
pleasant
not a
weather.
sweating hog
And
when it's 23
some
degrees.
people are like, "Oh my God, look at the weather in Ontario right now. It's 30 degrees. It's amazing."
Yeah,
And I'm
whenever,
like, I don't want that.
whenever anybody's like, "Oh man, 28," I'm like, "Ugh, get out of
Yeah,
here."
right?
Why do you want it to be 28 degrees
You want
for?
like 24, 25,
Right.
26.
Yeah.
Those are
You want it to be 28 degrees so you can have a reason to stay inside in an air conditioned
yeah,
room.
right. Exactly.
So this was really interesting. So it said an increase in quote unquote pleasant temperatures, which I don't know what the actual definition for that is, but I would probably agree with you of like 15 to 20. That's also around the air. That's probably the range where UV goes from like not below 15 degrees. Again, I'm making fucking speculations here. I would imagine that below 15 degrees, you're probably skirting with like the low end of the UV spectrum as well. So it says pleasant temperatures, when they increase by 2.5 degrees, melanoma increases by 21%.
Whoa.
That's a finding of this study. And they reference places like Newfoundland, and they say, well, basically Newfoundland doesn't get nearly as much sun as Nova Scotia does. Temperatures are more mild, and so we see lower rates of melanoma in a place like Newfoundland. Also, and this is the double whammy for Nova Scotia, and why you don't want to live here because you're going to get skin cancer, but also you do want to live here because it's so fucking awesome, is that if you live somewhere where vegetation and greenery is prevalent, melanoma rates increase by 15%.
Wow.
So you're putting these two things together, the temperature
What?
and the greenery, and
Why
those
is
are
that?
those are two driving factors of like what probably many rates of melanoma.
Do you think
Higher
that's
rates of
because,
melanoma.
so I was thinking of, like I lived in Dubai for almost 5 years,
Mhm.
and my brother lives there now, and he sent me a text the other day and said, it's the hottest day I've ever experienced in my entire life. I was telling you about this. It felt like the feels like temperature was 63 degrees Celsius.
And you know what Dennis is getting the least of right now?
Sunshine.
Exactly. He's not going outside.
Right. But also I was wondering about the desert in general. So like the winters in Dubai are really nice. Like they're pleasant.
They're very pleasant.
Very pleasant. But you don't really spend a lot of time outside, definitely not in nature.
Dubai's
because
just
it's like a rocky
Dubai's just like an
desert.
indoor type of place.
Totally. And so I was wondering
Culturally.
if it is, do you think that reason, increased greenness and vegetation, is that, like, is that correlated to like this like
Desire to
feeling
be
or
outside.
desire to be outside?
Yep. Yeah.
So, like
it's
going to like green spaces and green areas and like spending time out on
Yep.
on a lawn or in the woods,
Yep.
walking or whatever.
Yep.
More skin
And I would
cancer.
probably also speculate, this is again pure speculation, but in places like, let's say if you took the climate, let's say, because Toronto gets hot and stanky, right?
Mhm.
In the summers. If you took our temperatures and just plop them down in Toronto, which obviously is not realistic because it's in a different place, but also not just a different place, but it's also a much bigger concrete city, which traps heat in a different way. But if you just transplanted the temperatures to Toronto, you wouldn't get that greenery part because it's so hard to get out of Toronto to go somewhere nice. Whereas in Halifax, you can live in Halifax, and more every month, it seems, is a city. It's like a city. And you can still get out to what feels like the middle of nowhere in 15 to 20 minutes driving.
Right. Yeah.
I can get on my bike and feel like I'm in the middle of the nowhere in 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And that's wild. That's a very unique feature for a city. So you're getting this densely populated area that also feels like it can go out and like the whole population or a large portion of the population probably feels like nature is very accessible here.
What do you think it is about greenness? And okay, from a personal perspective, there's this like, I know that I feel this like attraction or like draw to like green leafy vegetation, even in the city. So like the other night I was walking Rupert, it was like 11 o'clock at night. I was taking him out for a pee before bed. And one thing I love about, like I live right downtown, and when I take Rupert out at night in like May, a lot of the like garden beds and things that they're planting, like just sort of have these little like sprouts that might be coming up. But the crazy thing is and I remember thinking this year was the second year that I lived in this apartment, and I was like, man, it was so green last year. Like, I'm not sure that those little sprouts are going to be able to turn into as much green grass and vegetation as there was last year.
And then we got 2,000 mils of rain.
Yeah. And it seems like it's even more greeny and grassier, and there's even more vegetation this year than last year.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we've also, I know I was joking, but we have had historic rainfalls this summer.
Which is crazy. Like it's so crazy to see that evolution over the course of the year, but in the middle of summer, like there's just like, I was looking at this green grass and like just feeling this like immense amount of love for it. Like I was so happy that it was this time of year. It was like 11 o'clock at night and I'm wearing a t-shirt and shorts, and I just feel so comfortable in that environment. But what is it, do you think that draws us to nature like that?
I think it's probably, I'm sure there's a handful of things. I would say from like an objective standpoint, I bet there's an evolutionary biology piece to it that has something to do with the equation, like just how we're wired as like a species. I think more particularly to us as people who live in this place in the world, not humans in general, but like us living in Nova Scotia, Canada in general. But the fact that our winters suck quite hard. And I think that's even particularly true for Nova Scotia, because I think like BC in the mountains winter is not the same winter that we're having. You know, we're like BC or Calgary or whatever, like they're getting winter. It is cold from November until March or April.
Mm-hmm.
And then it warms up and there's a melt and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, hey, we're going into summer. Here we get, oh, it's summer. And then like it's winter for a day. And then it's like, hey, let's do summer again for like 3 days. And then let's do fall for like 2 weeks. And then we'll do winter for like 5 days. And then let's do 1 day of summer. And then for all of December, let's do like a fall-y sort of deal. And then in January, let's get 2 weeks of death winter. And then let's actually let's heat it up by 15 degrees and melt everything down and make everything slushy and nasty and dirty. And then let's kick it back into winter. And then let's give them a taste of summer for a day at the end of February. That makes it seem like it's all going to end really soon. And then we'll go hard winter for another 2 months.
That's true.
And it fucking sucks. So because of that, we have the contrast to that, which is, wow, we finally exited this bullshit. And whether you're consciously, I don't think many people are consciously thinking that, but going, wow, when it starts to show up, you go, oh,
sweet,
this is amazing. And I think a lot of people, especially in North America or anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere, can really sympathize or empathize with that reaction of like, wow, summer's here. And the reason it's so sweet is because we had to endure the kind of the you can make you make do with what you got, but it's shittier than summer, that's for sure.
Yeah, like if it was summer, 24 or 365 days a year, we wouldn't appreciate it the same way that we do here. But I think that's like this is a fairly like we don't get this geo-specific usually on the podcast talking specifically about where we're from and what it's like here. But I think that this is a really relatable experience to a lot of people who, like you said, live in the Northern Hemisphere like this, who experience 4 seasons. We just kind of have that on like turned up a notch here because it is, like you said, so unpredictable. By now, Jared would be like, guys, let's just talk about something fucking different because we've been talking.
Yeah, Jared would go, fuck it, this is boring. Like I wouldn't want to live in Vancouver. I love Vancouver. I love Vancouver. I think Vancouver is spectacular, but I can't deal with that gray all the time. I really can't.
Yeah.
I am fine with the shit winter to not have the gray, because Vancouver gets incredible mild temperatures all year round, really.
It's so fun. Like hearing you say that, I don't know what it is about like my psychological makeup that like hearing you even say it's so gray there, even though I know that that's
so
pretty
gray.
true. I feel
They make up for it with a lot of beautiful landscapes.
I feel
but, man,
when I
fuck, it's gray.
when I think of my times in Vancouver, I don't think about the gray.
No,
And I feel that way about here too. Like going back
Sure.
to the thing I was saying about like taking offense to when people are talking about how shitty the weather is. You know, Maddie pointed this out the other day that like a lot of the, you know, small talk that we have in our elevator, a lot of times people are saying like, oh fuck, you know, wish this rain would stop. Like wish this, and it's always this like negative sort of like commiseration about how shitty the weather is when like it's not really that bad. Like we went through a couple rough bouts recently, but like even so, it's not
summer.
really that bad. And I wonder what that is. Like, is it that these people are just looking for some sort of form of connection in like a, you know, like let's commiserate together. It sucks. You know, we have this shared experience.
It's a negative bias, man.
But like, why not like, why can't it be about something positive?
I don't know. That's a fascinating psychological question. So Nova Scotia and PEI also have a higher awareness of melanoma, like within the population. Like we're more like, hey, skin cancer.
So like put your sunscreen on, like that type of stuff.
And so we have higher rates of like some protection use, but it's not enough because we get more burns.
Okay.
And then we get more sun exposure, we get more burns, and then thus
we got more of everything.
Cancer. Yeah. So this was actually something that I because I ride bike a lot and I get like kind of strange tan lines because of that. And so I used to be a person because if I get like one burn at the beginning of the summer, which I try to avoid, then after that one burn, I won't burn again. Like I just won't, unless I were to like actively cook myself outside.
I
don't go outside to be in the sun. Like I don't give a fuck about going outside and being like, hey, let's soak it up.
It's funny that you say that you try to avoid it though, because like I heard you at the start of this summer going, it's getting to that time where I got to lay down my base burn. And that's what you refer to it as, your base burn.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the day you actually put it in your, I remember seeing you put it in your calendar
base burn day
this year because you were looking at the weather in early June and the temperature was going to be high that week. And you were like, guys, don't book any recordings for Wednesday. I'm laying down my base burn.
Yeah, it's my base burn day.
And you just went out and cooked all day. And then you kept saying afterwards, like, I can't believe that happened, as if you didn't intend on doing that.
Don't talk to me until I've had my base burn.
Right.
And so what's something that the last thing I'll say on this is, on that same thought that I was on before, is that because I've always been like that, I don't think enough about wearing sunscreen, but over the past couple of years, I have thought about it a lot more. You know, I'm 32 and like, 30 years of being exposed. I've worn sunscreen obviously. And especially when I travel, I wear sunscreen pretty religiously, but I don't think about it at home as much. And I think that's probably because in relation to traveling, the sun here seems so mild. Yeah. In relation to like going somewhere, if like Southeast Asia, for example, where I spend a lot of time.
I used to cook my skin a lot. Especially when you
were paddling.
I did, but also like I would lay out in the sun and like put on oil and like just burn myself.
Your little Playboy bunny sticker.
Well, I used to go to the tanning salon too.
So did I.
But
horrific.
But like I kind of notice. I feel like I have a lot of skin damage.
When like Brian and I say we went to the tanning bed, we mean when we were teenagers.
Yeah.
So just so everybody knows, our brains weren't developed yet. So just so you know, just want to give that context.
But
we were children, okay?
Yeah, and which I feel like I don't know. Like I have sort of like freckles on my upper arms and like and rough skin, and I think a lot of it comes from sun damage.
Totally.
And so I don't really spend a lot of time outside in the sun in summer, like in direct sunlight. I'm usually doing something if I'm out in the sun, in which case absolutely. Like I'll put
it's an activity,
sunscreen on, but I don't like lay in the sun in the sun in the summer. I mean, that's mostly because I have ADHD and like I can't just lay. I need to be doing something.
Totally. Well, I don't have ADHD and I feel the same way. So Alex Dowsett, I was watching one of his YouTube videos the other day. If you don't know who Alex Dowsett is, he was on the show with us. He has a disease called hemophilia. He is, I'm a big fan of his. He's a pro cyclist. He just recently retired has won 2 stages of the Giro d'Italia, former world hour record holder. And I was watching him, and he was talking about how, he's 30, I guess he'd be like 35, 36, somewhere in there. And he was like, I never really took care of my skin that much as a cyclist, but he's from the UK, where by and large, he's riding in cloudy conditions a lot of the time. And he remarked on how all the guys that he ever rode with on all the pro teams he rode with, the Australians were like crazy on sunscreen, and they always had the nicest skin.
Huh,
really? Because from a super young age, they are like, sun protection is like the altar to which you pray, because you just need, because the sun is so strong. If you're not protecting your skin, then you're fucked. So they all have like really, really nice skin because they've been protecting themselves actively from the sun. Obviously, I'm making a general statement there, but that they're protecting themselves from the sun in a way that like a lot of other places aren't.
If there was one thing I could do going back in time, would be to wear more sunscreen and take better care of myself and have better sun hygiene.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So if you want great weather and a little bit more skin cancer, visit Nova Scotia. What a nice little advert for our beautiful home. Unless you just protect yourself and you wear your adult cap. Okay. Let's do the stroke. Let's do the stroke first. So this is, we're gonna have a little editorial decision here. We're gonna put the stroke piece here. Okay.
What's the stroke piece?
Okay. So a woman, 20 years ago, I believe she's a teacher from Saskatchewan. This is a New York Times piece. Saskatchewan woman, teacher, has like a mega stroke, like everything's different now stroke. Can't speak as a result. In a wheelchair. I'm not 100% sure. It didn't really go too deep. The article didn't seem to go very deep into like her overall function, but she couldn't speak. She is in a wheelchair.
If you had to guess, what would you say?
I would say she has mobility, but it's on the limited side. She has a lot of mobile aid happening in like the photos of the article. Was
she able to go down water slides?
Sorry?
Is she able to go down water slides?
That is such a specific question. Just
trying to paint a picture.
I highly doubt they covered that in the article. If
you had to guess.
I read most of the article. I didn't see it in there. No mention of water slides.
If you had to guess,
interesting question.
Do you think she could do water slides?
I would say no.
What about a lazy river?
I'd say a lazy river with like the proper safety equipment. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Has a hospital bed at home. Like a lot of physical aids required after a stroke. So she participated in a study. Now, I think we actually might have covered the first iteration of this study a couple of years ago. Okay. So 2 years ago, the same team that published this recent study it's basically electrodes. It's an implant of electrodes onto the brain. So, and you can see here, Bri, that this is what it looks like. This is like what the implant looks like.
Yeah.
A little kind of like quarter-sized.
It's like Frankenstein's bolt, except in going into the side of her head, it goes into like the top.
Yeah, more like the crown. And so that is implanted in, and there's electrodes there, and then they have her looking at a digital avatar on a screen, and she thinks, and the avatar speaks.
That makes sense.
So it is picking up what she's putting down.
Yeah.
How wild is that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Thinking, and then a computer goes, I know exactly what you mean.
It's crazy, but like, it's crazy. So if you told me this 4 years ago,
It would totally blow your mind.
Totally. But knowing now what is possible with artificial intelligence, like you shared the video with me, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago now, about the demonstration of artificial intelligence reading brain imaging and telling you what you saw in your dreams.
Yeah.
Right. And so
constructing an image out of what you are thinking.
Right. And this is effectively what this is doing with, words.
Mm-hmm.
And so am I surprised that you can do this now? No.
Yeah, I agree.
Is it exciting to see, what that technology could do, 3 or 4 months ago being applied to a use case like this, where you're giving somebody who lost their ability to communicate with language back that, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that's super cool.
Yeah. So I want to say something on that, but I want to just give this stat here so we can get some context into like how well it works. So 2 years ago, and I believe we covered this because I saw this article, and then Jer shared it I saw this article somewhere, and then Jer shared it in our folder for Friday content. And,
is this recent?
well, yeah, I think we're recording this on a Monday. The article, I believe, was like late last week.
Okay.
And so 2 years ago, the same team did a study that got 15 words per minute via electrodes, an implant with electrodes. This is 78 words per minute now.
Whoa.
So a gigantic increase. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, five-fold increase ish. And the human average is 160 per minute for speaking. So it's still only halfway to human, but that was 2 years ago. And so we're probably going to be it made a 5-fold increase in 2 years. So, I mean,
the rate of improvement.
I'm not a mathematician, but I would say that being on par with human is coming down the line in about next 10 days.
Do you think that that's not a good thing? Like, do you think it's better if we're forced to slow down in what we're thinking and trying to say?
AI? For us to slow down?
No, like, so you're saying that we think or speak 80 words, it's 160 words,
right? Yeah.
A minute.
That's just like a human average.
Do you think that sometimes maybe that's too fucking fast? Like, do you think that people should slow down when they're speaking to maybe communicate more effectively? Like, I'm asking you, do you think
That's
that people
big, broad question.
fucking speak too much sometimes when they should be more thoughtful about what they're saying?
Well,
because I do it.
So,
I'm doing it right now.
I guess. I guess it depends on what the context is. On social media, yes. But like, if you're communicating with a person face to face, of course, there's always going to be efficiency loss to wordiness and, an inability to convey your idea, with the right words or whatever it might be. But I don't necessarily think we want to slow down. We've had this conversation before about like being able to, this is Elon Musk's whole thing with Neuralink, is like our mouth is a really, really, really narrow bottleneck for what's going on in our brains. Like, we are producing some really fucking wild things in our brains, and we're trying to communicate that with our mouth.
That's a struggle of my life.
And that is a big challenge for everybody on earth. And so these types of things, like this is because a lot of consumer technology begins oftentimes consumer technology begins with like a medical use. And so that's what Neuralink is. It's, its thing is severed spinal cords, and epilepsy is like intervening before an epileptic event happens, or reestablishing the electrical connection in the central nervous system in order to communicate, so that someone's like leg muscles are communicating with their nervous system again in their brain. And then that technology is gonna expand out and become a consumer tech that is going to have who knows what applications. I mean, like I can't even begin to really wrap my head around exactly what that's going to be, but it will be wild, and it seemed like it was far off about a year and a half ago, and now it seems very close.
Dude, just wait. This year, I know. This isn't really super relevant to the podcast conversation, but I know we were talking about artificial intelligence, and I was telling you about my feelings and thoughts around OpenAI and Microsoft, and how Google's been, lagging behind quite a bit, and even in the performance of their LLMs right now, like there's still a big difference, I think personally, in what Microsoft is capable of, or OpenAI, compared to what Google is. But Google just last week announced, sort of drip fed some information about the Gemini model that's coming out in the fall, and they're like sort of putting everything under, all of their capabilities under one technology, and that is likely going to be like the next level of like what will sort of, I guess that will unlock a whole new set of potential that we don't have access to right now, and then there will be another version of that and another version of that, and it's happening so quickly. And they're going
to come quick. Each iteration will come faster than the last.
Like the consumer versions of these things, it's really hasn't even been a year since these things started coming out, these tools, and it's just getting faster and faster and faster.
Yeah. So to
faster.
So to return to this, but on that same on a thought that I had about what you said there, that will bring us back to this story, is similar to what we were talking about with the weather. Like summer is beautiful because winter, or it's more beautiful, or we appreciate it more because of winter.
Humanity will be more beautiful after the AI winter.
The way when words are beautiful, their beauty is enhanced because there's so many shitty words, and we can use them in such shitty, horrible, horrific ways. And so when words are beautiful, we take notice. And that's why great writing, great poetry is celebrated and wins awards and, penetrates the public consciousness in a whole bunch of different ways, is because when it's beautiful, we take notice. We go, wow, words are beautiful. You know that I love writing. So like when I'm writing, sometimes,
and I don't feel that way about words as much. But hold on. Okay, I'm not disagreeing with your personal take, because that's fucking, your prerogative. But if I write something and it needs work, you'll say, yeah, like maybe a little bit different. But I've had times where I've written something and you've gone, wow, like, and it really nails it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's, like sometimes words just really convey. But to me, it's not about the words. Like to me, it's not about the words that you're using. It's about how effectively you communicated the idea. And so like, I don't really find that's why.
Can you do both?
And
can you?
I mean, personally, and I don't think that this is the right.
Or
opinion.
Are they one and the same?
I don't think that this is a good perspective to have. What mine is, I'm just telling you how I feel about it. Is like when I was in my teens and watched a lot of like rom-coms and stuff, I loved poetry. Like I loved like
rom-com. Like what rom-com is coming up for you? What's the title that
my favorite
comes
my favorite is 500 Days of Summer.
I knew you were going to say that.
But and The Notebook is obviously a classic.
Obviously.
But like,
what about Failure to Launch?
No, not as good.
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days?
Yeah, How to Lose a Guy is good.
I'm a McConaughey fan. What can I say?
But my feelings. So I loved poetry at that time. Like I was like sappy, like a hopeless romantic type of guy. Like
I remember you were an Oscar Wilde guy.
Loved poetry like that. But now I find like as an art, like if I go to the art gallery and I read poems in the art gallery for the art of it, I could be like, this is beautiful. But it also fucking annoys me to some extent, because I'm like,
but
what
you love
is
podcasts.
the idea?
But
like,
you love podcasts. You love produced podcasts, and
Totally.
all of those are written.
I know. And but I don't like the words I'm not attached to the words that they're using. I'm attached to the ideas that they're communicating. And so
Yeah, right. But the words are the vehicle for the idea.
Totally. And it should be that. It should be a vehicle and not a piece of art to me in communicating.
No, dude, that's what I'm saying. They're one and the same. When the vehicle conveys the idea concisely and efficiently and effectively, that is its beauty.
Yes, but when it gets too wordy or there's too much thought put into finding, I'm going to find a good synonym for
that's bad writing. Have you ever read Hemingway?
Yeah, I have read Hemingway.
Dude.
It's concise.
Yeah.
Easy to read.
Totally.
Short books.
He conveys the idea.
The Old Man and the Sea is easy. Like you can pick it up, read it in one setting. It's like 80 pages.
He doesn't use 10 words when one will do.
Right. So I like that. I like that type of writing.
That's good writing,
I suppose. But what is the point that you're making?
Well, this woman hasn't spoken in 20 years. So the contrast to her is that she hasn't used words in 20 years. And I took this piece down.
Was she
from
bad at using them, or was she pretty good?
Well, I mean, again, she's half as limited as the average human based on the technology that she's using. So, I wouldn't say it's top flight.
If you had to imagine though, you had to imagine. Okay,
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you.
No, just let me ask this.
If I had to imagine,
because it's more fun. For me, it's more fun to imagine before you tell me.
Right.
Because then you spoil what I imagine to be possible.
Okay.
So,
she hasn't spoken in 20 years, so she's a little out of practice.
Imagine you haven't spoken in 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. You've bottled it up. You haven't said anything.
You've been thinking.
10 years old. But
you've been thinking
a fuckload.
You've been thinking a lot.
What is the first thing you say?
Oh my God. The first thing I say?
Off the top of your head.
If I haven't spoken in 20 years?
Gun to your head.
Holy shit.
What is the first thing
Oh my God.
say?
This is a great little audience game that we should play. Think about that, everybody. What's the first thing you would say if you hadn't spoken in 20 years? What's the scene? Who am I speaking to? Who am I speaking to?
You got five words.
Am I in an empty room by myself, or am I speaking to somebody?
5 words or less. You can't say who's there. I mean, maybe it's your loved ones. Maybe you're in the hospital. Let's say you're in this lab with this fucking Frankenstein plug in your head. And all of a sudden you can talk. Your avatar's on the screen in front of you. Everybody's looking at it. You can say one thing. 5 words or less. What do you say? I know exactly.
I'm allergic to dairy. and I apologize.
That would explain a lot. That would explain a lot to people who are like, why do his farts smell so fucking bad?
Yeah.
That's actually good.
I would go, why didn't you check if I was allergic to dairy?
I would say something along the lines of like, holy fucking fuck. Like
I think it's hard for us to put ourselves in these shoes for real.
I can tell you exactly what I'd say. It would be holy fucking fuck, because like unlocking that ability would feel so good that like you wouldn't know what to say. I mean, is probably the point. And you would react in a way where you're not even really using language to its full potential. So what the actual fuck or like holy fucking fuck, whatever it is in 5 words or less is like just like verbalizing. I imagine to be what that feeling would be like of like, oh my God, it works. And then I'd probably say something more profound.
So something beautiful about this woman speaking again for the first time, which really struck me was, says she and her husband William, a postal worker, even engaged in conversations. She said through the avatar. So she's only getting access to this when she's like being studied. It's not at home with her all the time. It's not. Right. She doesn't have the technology. It's like she's using it for the study that they're conducting. And said, she said through the avatar, "Do not make me laugh." He asked how she was feeling about the Toronto Blue Jays' chances. "Anything is possible," she replied. Like, I just went, first of all, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But second of all, it's like anything would have just been the most beautiful thing in the world. Imagine, like, from her husband's perspective going, we've been married for they've been married for longer than 20 years, but for the last 20 years of our marriage, you haven't been able to speak. I've had to interpret what you want and need through like all these various methods and everything that are either slow or clunky or have their flaws.
Like handwriting.
Right. Which like, again, I'm not 100% sure if writing is possible for her. I wouldn't be surprised if it's
I think she can go down water
taxing.
slides though.
Right, the water slides. But being able to go to just like ask a question and get an answer like quickly, would just melt your heart.
Totally. It would be funny though if she was like, "Don't make me laugh," and I imagine the robot. Like, have you made Siri laugh for you, or ever wrote like "ha ha ha ha"? Don't make me laugh. Oh,
yeah, it's very off-putting.
It would suck not having your actual voice though. You know, like having like a Siri-esque voice to speak to. I mean,
yes. Well, they
but
trained it. They trained the voice on I believe they said it was based on wedding speeches. They took wedding speech videos.
Oh, really?
From because like I guess 20 years ago, you know, it's not like we were carrying around phones that recorded, you know, every fucking thing that pops into our head, putting it on Instagram stories for no fucking reason. Sorry, everybody.
This is a benefit of like having a podcast, and like if we ever have a stroke and lose our voices,
there's so much content
synthetically.
I love how I just threw shade at people who do Instagram stories and we speak ad nauseum on a podcast every week. If she could have done it for 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, she would have. Man. Well, you know what? I think there is a lot of hope for that situation for her to improve drastically in the next, but a week and a half until the AI revolution. So, okay, our last piece here, which I switched to the last. I had it last, and then I switched it to second, and then I reorganized the last. I mean, it's not that crazy. It is crazy, but there's not a whole lot of content here. We're not going to have a whole long conversation, or maybe we will. I mean, we can talk about anything. Japanese couple speak for the first time in 20 years.
Wait.
I'm going to read you. This was an Instagram post.
These aren't the same things?
No.
Wait, what?
Wow, I didn't even, and you know what? Until this very moment, I didn't even see the I didn't even see the connection.
What the fuck? What do you mean you did? I was like, "Oh, this is the one we just I was like, "Oh, it's funny that you left out the fact that they were Japanese because you introed it with that and then like you didn't."
Wow. Okay, so here we go. So here, let's do a different setup then. Okay, so we just spoke about somebody who tragically has not been able to speak for 20 years because of a stroke. And that is that I bet, I'm sure, feels like a senseless robbery of one's capacity to fully express themselves in their relationships with the people around them.
This is going.
Okay. In contrast to that, a man in a relationship, in a marriage, decided not to speak to his wife anymore.
Oh, that's a divorce.
Well, let me tell you. So what I did is I looked at this, I saw this, and then I actually I saw a comment on the post on Instagram, and then I looked into some of the like cultural things around divorce in Japan to try and get some context for like, because to what you said, it's like divorce. Well, I would just divorce. Well, there's some cultural, it's not.
Do they live together?
It's not as straightforward. So
do they share a bed?
O2 Katayama back in 2017 admitted that that he had not spoken to his wife for 20 years, despite living together in Nara, Japan. Their 18-year-old son, Yoshiki, which means that they were not speaking when they conceived their son and then didn't speak his entire life. Wow. Revealed that O2 communicated with his wife through nods and grunts. Their son prompted a meeting between the couple in the park where they had their first date, and O2 opened up about his jealousy towards the attention his wife gave to their kids. This emotional conversation marked the first time they had spoken in 20 years. Okay. Super happy for this guy that he opened up and was able to say that. That's a big step, obviously. 20 years in the making.
Yeah.
But also, again, your first thought is my first thought, and the top comment on the Instagram post as well was that first thought. Like, why don't just get divorced?
My first thought was the Jody Carrington. It's not what happened to you, or sorry, it's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you.
And you are probably correct. Although I will say that just because something happened to you doesn't mean that all is forgiven.
No,
because there are consequences to the things that you do.
No, of course, but like I'm not saying as somebody looking at the situation, not involved with it. My thought is not what's wrong with this person. Why the fuck did this happen? It's like obviously something happened to this person, which is what led this to happen. Now, like the repercussions of the situation and the fact that I think that these people should have separated, that stands true. And I also think that like there's obviously some sort of deep-seated issues here at play that would lead someone to, as you said, feel jealous towards their own kids. And like, obviously, to me, not to like psychoanalyze these people, but because we have a podcast and we talk about these things, I'll give my opinion on what I think happened. I mean, if this guy grew up without receiving love from his parents and then saw, the mother of his children showing love towards their kids in a way that he never received it, it would be easy to see how that could feel, someone could feel jealous about that, because it's this experience that they never got in their childhood growing up. And then all of a sudden they're seeing this other person provide so much love, and like you'd probably resent the people who are getting that love in a way that you never got it if you didn't address those feelings in the first place.
Yeah, and I think you're probably. I wouldn't be surprised if you're a little bit right about some of that.
Not to like say that that's this person's story, but like I'm saying, I could see how that
you're saying
could
that from kind of like your experience and going to therapy and like the common things that have to do with why we are the way we are. And I think also what is playing into something like this is Japanese cultural norms and customs, and not to say that that's like a cultural norm to ignore your spouse for 20 years, but I do know that that Japanese culture has a myriad of of strict things, and I know that talking about your feelings is quite stigmatized, heavily stigmatized, which is one of the reasons why there is a minister for loneliness in Japan, and why suicide rates in Japan are also like really, really high, because there isn't broadly a feeling that talking about how you feel and why you're feeling that way is accessible. And I thought of like the kid, and it sounds like there's multiple kids. Like, man, could you imagine? Like,
yeah.
And then what that then does for their relationships. Cause like you said, it's not why am I losing my train of thought on that phrase?
It's not what's wrong with you.
It's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. And like these kids obviously all had something happen to them, which was their parents' relationship, which was basically non-existent.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's sad.
Isn't it crazy that so about the divorce thing?
It does just go to show that, like, just to make a point on that, like it does go to show how not talking about things, how bad things can get. And it might feel easy to not talk about things, like it's easier to avoid this and just not talk about it. And like obviously they're living under the same roof, and they must have like some sort of amicable relationship where they're raising kids together. And so like it seems like that's something that could just get away from you. And like, obviously in a way that's not okay.
Yeah.
But like, as that sort of, one day turns into 2 days, it turns into 3 days. And then all of a sudden 20 years have gone by, and that's your situation.
So, Now I'm curious about I think that you will probably agree with what I'm about to say, mostly because of your experience with your parents getting divorced and your experience going to therapy. But I had a conversation with a friend of ours a couple weeks ago when we were driving down to the Shore Club for Rich's show, and I was basically saying, I think he was saying something to me about a particular relationship that was going through or a rough divorce, or maybe it was somebody in the relationship who had previously had a really crazy divorce or something to that effect. Anyway, and we ended up on the topic of divorce, and I mentioned, that I thought that divorce has a bad rep. And I think divorce has a bad rep because we just historically have just been bad at communicating because of cultural stigmas and taboos that have pervaded North American society and probably every culture in the world at some point, if not carrying on right now. That there is that we just don't talk. So like when things come up, when something happens in a relationship that needs attention because someone's feelings aren't being recognized or needs aren't being met or this or that or the 1,000 things that can come up in a relationship, instead of talking about it, we just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then that brings resentment or guilt or whatever. And then that snowballs, and then the relationship stays together because maybe there's some sense that like, if just the relationship stays together, that's really what matters. And then people go off and then they create secret lives, and start other relationships and do this and do that. And it's like, well, that's all just a result. And then they get divorced, and the divorce is horrible because in the divorce, all the dirt comes out.
Yeah.
And everybody finds out about all the shitty things that we've done during the time where we were harboring all these feelings of resentment or whatever. But if just at the moment we were feeling those things, we had talked about it, then maybe there's something to be said about saving a relationship. But besides saving the relationship, at least you might be able to amicably come to the realization that being together is not the greatest path forward for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that, because I think a relationship coming to an end should be a net positive for everybody, even if you're not the one that thinks the relationship should end. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if the other person thinks that, then you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to be with you, and being with a person that doesn't want to be with you is not good for you.
It should be, but it's also hard and it's also messy because
100%.
What happens in relationships, and like in my previous relationship, like you say things to your partner when you're in these moments of like love, and like things like like I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and I love you. I mean, I love you obviously, but I want to spend the rest of my life with you is like one of those things that you're saying to this person. You're setting these expectations that your relationship will last forever. And then, even if in the moment that was the truest thing, that like your heart really felt that way and you were like, this is the person for me, and you're dating, and then, the relationship starts to not feel that way. It's hard. It's now really hard because you've sort of set these expectations for your partner in a way that's unfair.
You feel like you're,
I shouldn't say unfair too, because like, I don't think that you should avoid saying things like that in the moment if you truly feel them.
Sure.
But it would really hurt for the person to hear you don't feel that way anymore. And then, obviously it's that the person who's hearing that, it's obviously their job now to like contend with those emotions and like try to like, manage their emotions through that feeling. But it can oftentimes feel like, what the fuck did I do wrong? Like, how did it get to this point? And even if you're just bringing those feelings up for the first time in a relationship, it's really hard. Like
I totally agree. And I hope that I don't come across as saying that like, if you just bring it up, then like, well, as if bringing it up is the easiest thing to do in the world. Cause I know that that's very hard
but
to do.
But the earlier you do it, the way better the final outcome will be. 100%. For sure.
And especially if you've got kids, because the kids are seeing what you're doing And then they're basing what they feel about relationships off of what you do in your relationship. And so the reason, and one of the things that we got to in this conversation was like, well, as hard as that is, no doubt, as hard as it is to do that, no doubt, to bring those things up and have those conversations, if we can just improve on our sentiment of the word divorce or relationship ending or whatever, breakup, then we are way more likely to create a generation of kids that are at least marginally better at doing that than we were, which in turn will hopefully create another generation which is marginally better than them, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that, a few generations from now, divorce maybe doesn't carry with it the like huge negative connotation.
It does feel like one other interesting thing about, like as somebody who grew up watching rom-coms, as I've said a bunch of times, the idea, the way that the media portrays relationships and like how like, the story, like love stories and soulmates and things like that, I feel like do a disservice to real relationships. And I think that's it's hard because like being in a relationship where someone's like, oh, you're my soulmate, and like this is like the storybook relationship that I've always wanted, that then sets a person up for, potentially or having a really hard time with navigating the end of that relationship if it comes to an end.
Yeah.
And like I believe in, like, I think that I'm a storybook love kind of guy in a sense. Like I feel that way towards Maddie. And I also feel like at the same time that, life happens to people, and in, 30 or 40 years, it's hard to say that like that will be the exact same then as it is now. And
people
like,
are different.
I hope it is, but if it isn't, then like, how do you navigate that? And how do you,
that's a really good point. I do want to move towards wrapping up with a couple points from this article, but it is a good point to make that like, you might change, people evolve and they grow. And if you don't communicate within a relationship how you are feeling, then when you grow and evolve, you are going to do that independent of your partner. And when you both grow and evolve independently and not together, that's when you're growing apart. But if you communicate, and I don't mean that, I mean independently like with a negative connotation, like pushing away. Whereas if you are open about how you feel like you are changing, then again, we're not guaranteeing anything, but the odds are greater that your evolution will coincide a little bit with each other.
I think too, when I think about like my own thoughts on
really getting into like
this,
some some relationship therapy here, aren't we?
I'm
not a therapist.
I think the interesting thing though about like my thoughts personally, when I'm thinking about my thoughts on this situation, I grew up like thinking that my parents had the perfect relationship. Like I grew up in a middle class home with a house with a 2-car garage, and my dad worked, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I was like, this is great. Up until I was 15, like I never thought that my parents would ever get divorced. I knew divorce was the thing, but didn't think that it would be a thing for me or my parents. And then it happened, and all of a sudden you realize in that moment that something that you thought to be so true and like so solid and secure was no longer that. And so I think in experiencing that myself, I now have this perspective that even something that seems so amazing and so unbreakable can break and fall apart. And so I don't think it's like a negative perspective or a sad outlook to think that a relationship can come to an end 20 or 30 or 40 years from now. I think it's the reality of the situation. And like you're saying earlier, if you don't talk about,
I think it's negative
early.
if you think it's the inevitable outcome.
yes, yeah, yeah. And like I've definitely struggled with the, especially dating during that time, like when I was in my like late teens, I never wanted to like actually have a relationship with a person or date, like be boyfriend, girlfriend with the person at that time, because I would think about it and be like, well, we're not going to get married,
Right.
So why the fuck would I date this person? Because I'm just inevitably going to have to break up with them. So like, what's the point? And so it like really
Did
prevented
you
me
consciously think that?
Totally. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because your parents got divorced.
Yeah. So like why would I want to go through the end of a relationship that I know is going to likely going to be true? So I'll just keep people like always far enough away that I never have a really serious relationship.
That's so interesting. Every relationship that I was ever in, I always just treated it as if it would go on forever.
Yeah.
And not in like a, oh, we're going to get married. I just treated it as if like every day every day would come just as inevitably as the last day had passed. Like it was just like, that's just where we were. It was just like a day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Crazy, right? And your parents are still together.
They are. So the only thing that I wanted to say on this before we wrap up here, because we just had this whole thing about divorce and blah, 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 blah. So Japan has a mega stigma on divorce. I think it was like basically a no-no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, largely like it was in
the 50s,
like Western European,
the Catholic Church.
Culture and Catholic Church. If you grew up like in pre 1960s, probably like really big no to be divorced in North America. But that continued a little bit longer, I think, in Japan, and has not softened as much as it has in our culture at all. A case in point, there must be some reasonable, this is from a divorce lawyer, there must be some reasonable cause to grant divorce, like infidelity or violence. Just an incompatibility cannot be a cause for divorce in Japan.
That's okay.
So that's a major barrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's pretty much why that's why a lot of people need to be not together.
Yeah.
It's because they shouldn't be.
Probably, I mean, I shouldn't say the primary reason, but should be the first reason.
Certainly should be. Obviously, infidelity or violence are both, horrible things that we hope doesn't happen to anybody, but we know that they do.
The last thing too I wanted to say about divorce and how it can affect someone, just in nature of sharing, in case somebody else is going through something like this. But like a lot of things I talk about in therapy is like I'll use the word fear, but I don't feel afraid of it. But sort of like a fear of commitment or an aversion to commitment. Not in the sense that like you're not willing to be committed to something, but like in a sense that like sort of like what's the point? Because
it's going to end.
It could end.
Right.
And so
that's why I never watch movies. That's why you don't watch movies.
Yeah.
Because you know it's going to end.
But also like
why start it?
Getting married myself. Like Maddie definitely wants to have a wedding. And for me, I just like have never, I find it so hard to think about getting married, like having an actual like formal celebration of it. Not because and again, like it has nothing to do with like my relationship and thinking that that it's going to end. It's just like, what's the point of this? Because this actually doesn't mean anything. Like it really doesn't. This has no, like I can be equally as committed as I am now, if not more committed, without having any sort of
this
formal
day
celebration.
And this party
like,
and the money spent is not solidifying my relationship any more than it already is.
No, because I've seen how it doesn't for other people.
I mean,
and
preaching to the choir, brother.
That's like
I'm not married. I've got
Yeah, I don't want to like say again, like it's not, this is my like trauma. Like it's not like this is my beliefs because it's rooted in my past experience. Like that's the reality of the situation for me. It doesn't have to be true, but that is the way that like I feel because of my experiences.
Yeah. And it's weird because I feel the same way, but I don't have those experiences.
Yeah. But you kind of do too, in a way. I mean, like
Because of like,
Yeah.
right. Because
you grew up with me.
because you're my brother. Right. And your mom is my second mom. So that makes
which in a way,
total sense.
you probably do have some of those.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Wow. Well, that's a nice little can of worms to end with. Okay. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Hope you're feeling good. Hope you're feeling a little bit philosophic about your relationships after our little expose on them and all the interesting things that we covered in today's episode. If you liked the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. Go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Amazon Music and Stitcher.
Yeah.
Are we on Stitcher?
Podbean.
There's some obscure ones out there.
We're recording this on a Monday because I'm on my way to a wedding.
Oh yeah, I totally
I'm
forgot about
literally
that.
at a wedding right now.
That's
Probably
right.
while people are listening to this.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, and Brian's
It'll be
looking
fun.
around. Brian,
It'll be fun.
and this is what Brian's doing. He's sitting at the table because he's standing in the wedding and he's sitting at the head table and he's going, "What's even the point? Why even do it?"
I'm emceeing, and there's a point in the evening where we acknowledge all of the newlyweds who are there, and I'm just gonna go. Can all of you guys stand up? And there's like 20 newlywed couples at this wedding.
Now, at random, half of you sit down.
That's what I'm gonna say. I go. That's how many of you
You're
will
all
likely
divorced.
get divorced.
Now, that's okay. Just communicate openly, and everything will be all right.
I'm just kidding. It'll be great, and I do love a good wedding celebration.
Yeah. So rate, review, and subscribe your friends' relationships on whatever platform does that. I'm sure there is a platform out there that probably does that. If you want to be a guest on the show, go to sickboypodcast.com and fill out the form on there, or nominate somebody, or send us an email at letters@sickboypodcast.com if you know somebody like a researcher or a doctor or an author that's working on something interesting that's in the lane of health sciences, and maybe we'll have them on the show to talk to them on our Wednesday episodes.
Yeah, and if you want to check out some of the other work that we're doing producing podcasts, you can check out Snack Labs at wearesnack.io and send us a message there.
Sneaky little plug there.
A huge thank you to the people who make this show happen: Jeff Lonis, Donovan Morgan, the music from Take Part and Rich O'Coin. Thank you all. We love you so much.
That's it for this week.
I'm Brian.
I'm Taylor. And this is Sickboy.
And we said, not yet.